Preface: Emma never imagined that survival would cost her freedom. Sold by her father after years of cruelty, she lived as a shadow, weak, powerless, and alone until Alpha Ethan appeared, a force of authority and protection, offering her a way out of torment. But his help came with a binding condition: she must marry him, become his Luna, and fulfill the contract for an entire year. With no other choice, Emma agrees, stepping into a world of pack rules, unspoken power, and a bond that she cannot fully understand. Under Ethan's guidance, she discovers strength she never knew she possessed. But the clock of their contract ticks relentlessly. When the year ends, instead of freedom, she faces a rejection ceremony that shatters her heart. Pregnant and alone, she must decide: reveal the truth of her child to Ethan and risk another upheaval, or hide and navigate life on her own, in a world where wolves' loyalties and passions are as deadly as the wilderness outside. As shadows gather both within the pack and beyond, Emma's journey becomes one of survival, self-discovery, and the ultimate test of trust. Will the bond that was forced upon her turn into love, or will the betrayals of the past define her forever? Chapter 1: The contracted shadow. The rain fell in thin, relentless sheets, washing the world in silver streaks and puddles that mirrored the dim light of the full moon. Emma pressed herself against the wooden railing of the small bridge, her bare feet numb against the cold boards. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to run, but where could she go? The packlands she had grown up in, the lands that should have been home, felt like a cage, each tree and stone a reminder of her father's cruelty. She had learned to move quietly, to speak softly, to make herself as invisible as possible. For years, that strategy had kept her alive. Yet tonight, as the wind carried a scent she could not ignore, Emma felt the first flicker of dread she could not outrun. "You belong to him tonight." The words had come earlier that evening, heavy with finality, like a hammer striking against the fragile walls of her life. Her father's voice still echoed in her mind, low and commanding, as he gestured to the figure waiting beyond the rain. She had thought she understood despair, had thought she had survived the worst. She was wrong. The man standing under the moonlight, Alpha Ethan, radiated authority that seemed almost tangible, pressing against her like a physical weight. Broad shoulders, sharp eyes, and a presence that demanded obedience, even without a word. His gaze found her immediately, and Emma felt an involuntary shiver run down her spine. You saved me once," she whispered, voice barely audible above the storm. But Ethan's eyes did not soften. There was no warmth, no promise of mercy, not yet, only the unspoken condition that she knew she had no choice but to accept. "You will be my Luna," Ethan said, his voice steady, unyielding. "For 1 year. You obey the pack rules, you fulfill your duties, and you stay alive." Emma's chest tightened. Luna. A title that carried both honor and a cage. She had read the stories, the legends of those bound to alphas. She knew the whispers: once chosen, once bonded, there was no turning back. And yet, what choice did she have? Her father had offered her survival, or submission. Survival meant marriage. Marriage meant the Luna bond. The bond meant a year of captivity under his control. Her mind raced. Could she endure it? Could she obey the rules of a pack that had never been hers? Follow a man whose authority over her was absolute? And hide the fragility that threatened to betray her every step? She began, voice faltering. But Ethan's gaze held her in place, and she realized that hesitation would cost her more than fear ever could. "Yes," she whispered finally, a single word that tasted like ash in her mouth. Yes to survival. Yes to a year of servitude. Yes to the unknown that awaited her under the shadow of this alpha. Ethan stepped closer, the sound of his boots muted against the soaked earth. His hand extended, not in kindness, but as a gesture of possession, a declaration that the contract had begun. Emma flinched but did not step back. Pride, fear, and the faintest spark of defiance battled within her chest. "You understand the terms?" he asked. No question of morality, only law and power. "I understand," she said barely. Her words carried the weight of resignation, of forced submission, of a girl stepping into a life she had not chosen, yet could not escape. And in that instant, as lightning split the sky and rain hammered the wooden bridge, the bond began. Silent, insidious, and unyielding. Emma felt a pulse beneath her skin, an unfamiliar rhythm that was not entirely her own. Her breath caught in her throat, a mixture of fear and something else, something deeper that she could not name. The pack watched in the shadows, whispers swirling among the trees. Some eyes were curious, some judgmental, some hungry with envy, but Emma did not care. Survival was her only goal, and this man, this alpha, was both her prison and her shield. As Ethan turned and led her toward the pack grounds, the rain continued to fall, relentless and cleansing. Emma's thoughts were a storm of their own. How would she survive a year in a world where every rule was made by someone else? Could she endure the scrutiny, the duties, the watchful eyes of wolves who would see her as nothing more than a possession? And most of all, could she face the shadow of this alpha, the one who held her fate in his hands, and discover within herself the power she had always been too afraid to wield? Tonight her life had changed. The Luna's path was set, and there was no turning back. The storm was only the beginning. Chapter 2 Side E, The Bound Contract. The first light of dawn barely touched the pack grounds when Emma awoke, shivering under the thin blanket provided by the pack. The memory of last night's storm, the rain, the bridge, Ethan's commanding presence, was still vivid, a pulse beneath her skin that refused to fade. She sat up, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to chase away the tremor that had nothing to do with the cold. Breakfast in the main hall was a spectacle of hierarchy and control. Wolves of every rank moved with the precision of trained predators, eyes sharp, ears alert. Whispers followed her like shadows, some curious, some wary. She could feel the tension as she entered, the unspoken question: who was the new Luna, and would she endure, or would she falter under the weight of the contract? Ethan sat at the head of the table, as immovable as the mountain behind the pack lodge. His dark eyes swept across the room, settling briefly on her. That glance was enough to silence the murmurs, yet it carried no warmth. He expected obedience, vigilance, and perfection. "Emma," he said, voice cutting through the low hum of conversation. "Your training begins today," she swallowed hard. Training. The word was simple, clinical, but it implied a world she had no understanding of: physical demands, mental rigor, pack rituals, and an invisible pressure that made every misstep feel like a transgression against survival itself. "Yes, Alpha Ethan," she replied, forcing steadiness into her tone. Even as she spoke, her mind raced. 1 year. Just 1 year. If she could survive, if she could obey, endure, and stay alive, then perhaps, just perhaps, there was a sliver of hope beyond the cage of this contract. The first session was brutal. Ethan pushed her to her limits, demanding precision in movement, strength in posture, and obedience in response. She stumbled, faltered, felt the eyes of the pack on her like fire, but she endured. Each fall, each correction, was a reminder of her position. Not just a Luna in training, but a girl who had no other choice than to withstand. By midday, exhaustion pressed down like a physical weight, yet Emma noticed something subtle. Ethan's gaze, though sharp and authoritative, lingered at times, a flicker of assessment, of calculation. He was not cruel for cruelty's sake. He was precise, measured, a wolf who understood control and consequence in ways she was only beginning to grasp. During a brief break, she slipped away to the edge of the training grounds. Rain from the previous night had left the earth soft, clinging to her boots, and the scent of wet pine and wildflowers filled the air. Alone, she allowed herself a single tremulous breath. 1 year, she had survived worse. She could survive this. And yet, a shiver of unease ran down her spine. The bond, the invisible tether she could feel pulsing under her skin, was no longer a whisper. It was a low, persistent hum, threading through her veins. It was not Ethan's touch nor his words, but a force that demanded acknowledgement, intimacy, connection. She hated it, resisted it, yet could not ignore it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound, a step, careful, deliberate. She turned, and a young wolf from the pack approached. "Be careful," he murmured. "Not everyone here welcomes a Luna who comes from outside." Emma nodded, silently acknowledging the warning. Every member of the pack was a test, a challenge she had yet to understand fully. They could be allies or obstacles. Survival meant reading every glance, every gesture, every unspoken expectation. As the day waned, Ethan summoned her for a private session. The hall was empty, shadows stretching long under the setting sun. His expression was unreadable, his posture as rigid as the legends described. "You will learn," he said simply. "The pack is not kind to weakness, and the bond will test you more than I ever could. Do not mistake it for choice. It is law, not mercy." Emma's pulse quickened. The bond, the contract, the year ahead stretched before her like a narrow, dark corridor. Every step would be scrutinized, every breath measured, every thought a potential misstep. "I understand," she whispered. Though the word carried more weight than it ever had, understanding, survival, endurance, they were one and the same. Ethan nodded, a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, yet it conveyed both acknowledgement and warning. "Tomorrow, we begin the rituals. Tonight, you rest. You will need every ounce of strength for what comes." As she lay in the small room assigned to her, shadows from the moonlight danced across the walls. The bond thrummed under her skin, insistent and unyielding. She had survived storms, cruelty, and despair. Now, she would survive this. One day at a time, the year had begun. Chapter 3. Fractured loyalties. The forest had fallen into uneasy quiet. The rogues had retreated, but their presence lingered like smoke, an invisible stain that refused to dissipate. Aria crouched behind a fallen tree, chest heaving, claws digging into the bark, fur bristling from the remnants of adrenaline. The bond hummed beneath her skin, a constant reminder that Hunter was near, that he was aware of her every movement, and that she could not escape what had been thrust upon her. Hunter emerged from the shadows, eyes scanning the perimeter, ears alert, every muscle coiled with precision. The moonlight cast a silver sheen over him, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw, the tense line of his shoulders, the controlled rhythm of his breath. He was a predator even at rest, and yet, when he looked at her, there was something that softened the edge: regret, concern, the silent acknowledgement of the bond neither of them wanted. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "You can't fight like this and expect to stay unscathed." Aria's gaze met his, sharp, defensive. "I'm fine," she said, though the tremor in her claws betrayed her. "I don't need your warnings." Hunter stepped closer, closing the space between them, his presence heavy with unspoken tension. "It's not just about you," he said. "It's about the pack, about the bond. You can deny it, resist it, but it's there, Aria. It's shaping you whether you want it to or not." She flinched at his words. The bond, it was a constant, insistent pull, threading through her every thought, her every instinct. She hated it. Hated the way it made her pulse quicken when he was near. Hated the way it connected them in ways she couldn't control. And yet, she couldn't ignore it. Not entirely. The rogue attack had revealed something she had never fully acknowledged. The bond amplified her senses, heightened her instincts, made her faster, sharper, stronger. "I don't care about the bond," she said, her voice taut with defiance. "I care about surviving tonight. That's all." Hunter's eyes narrowed, a flicker of frustration crossing his features. "Survival isn't enough, Aria. You can't be half prepared in a war that's only just begun." She didn't respond. Words felt inadequate, actions mattered more. The rogues had retreated, yes, but their strategy was evident. Divide the pack, weaken the defenses, strike unpredictably. And somewhere in the shadows, the orchestrator of this chaos waited, observing, calculating. She could feel it, a malevolent presence threading through the night, and it terrified her in ways nothing else had. Hunter's hand brushed against hers, brief, almost accidental, and the bond reacted violently, a surge of heat and awareness that left her dizzy. She pulled back sharply, chest heaving. "Don't," she whispered, though her voice sounded small even to her own ears. "I can't," he admitted, eyes dark, voice raw with something she couldn't name. "Not when you're in danger, not when it's me or them." Her claws dug into the ground, a grounding point in the swirling storm of sensations. She hated feeling dependent, hated the way the bond made her vulnerable. And yet, as much as she tried to resist, she knew that tonight had changed everything. The rogue attacks had been a catalyst, tearing down her walls, forcing her into a new reality, one where Hunter and the bond were impossible to ignore. Movement flickered in the periphery of her vision. A figure, lithe and silent, slipped through the trees, a scout wolf from the pack, eyes wide with fear and urgency. "Alpha, there's more," the wolf panted, chest heaving. "The rogues, they're regrouping, they're coming from the south now." Hunter's jaw tightened. "Then we need to warn the others. Split the pack if we have to, but we stop them before they reach the village." Aria's pulse quickened, the bond surged, a tether pulling her toward him, syncing her heartbeat with his, merging instinct and awareness. She realized with a shiver that ran through her spine that the bond wasn't just a connection. It was a weapon, a channel for strength and coordination she had never tapped. But using it meant acknowledging it, embracing it, allowing herself to be vulnerable in ways she had long feared. "I can help," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. "Tell me what to do." Hunter's eyes softened, but only briefly. "Follow my lead, stay close, trust yourself, and trust the bond. It's stronger than you think." Together they moved through the forest, silent and lethal. Aria's senses flared, every rustle, every shift in shadow, every heartbeat amplified through the bond. She was aware of Hunter's position, his breathing, the way his body moved with precision and purpose. It unnerved her, this intimate connection, yet it also made her faster, sharper, more attuned to danger. The southern approach was chaos. Rogues had begun setting traps, fangs and claws slicing through anything in their path. Wolves scrambled, trying to protect the boundaries, but the suddenness and ferocity of the attack had left the pack in disarray. Aria's heart pounded as she leapt into action, claws extended, wolf instincts guiding every movement. She moved as one with Hunter, coordinated by the bond, anticipating each strike, countering attacks before they landed. A rogue lunged at her from the shadows. She sidestepped, claws raking across its flank, teeth bared in a snarl. The bond surged, giving her an almost preternatural awareness of Hunter's position, his movements, his next strike. Together, they were a force, two halves of a whole, their synergy amplified by a connection neither of them had chosen but could not ignore. Even in the heat of battle, her mind raced. Who had orchestrated these attacks? How had the rogues known to strike now, on her 18th birthday? And what did it mean that the bond had awakened with such intensity at this exact moment? The answers were elusive, hidden in the shadows that now seemed almost sentient, watching, waiting. Hours passed. Or perhaps minutes. Time had become fluid in the chaos. When the last rogue fell or fled, the forest lay in uneasy quiet once more. Wolves limped back to regroup, bloodied but alive. Aria stood beside Hunter, breath heaving, claws dripping with the remnants of the battle. The bond pulsed softly, a constant heartbeat, a reminder that this was only the beginning. Hunter's gaze met hers, steady, unwavering. "This was just a warning," he said. "And the bond, it will demand more. It will test you, push you, force choices you weren't ready to make. But you won't face it alone." Aria's chest tightened, a mix of fear, exhilaration, and reluctant acknowledgement. The bond was real, Hunter was real, and the world they had stepped into tonight was larger, more dangerous, and more unforgiving than she had ever imagined. For the first time she understood one immutable truth. Her life was no longer her own. And survival meant accepting, at least in part, the connection she had spent so long denying. The forest settled into silence, but the tension lingered, electric and unyielding. And as the moon climbed higher, casting pale light through the trees, Aria realized that the events of this night had irrevocably changed her path. She could fight the bond, fight Hunter, fight the world, but she could not escape the future that was now entwined with them both. Chapter 4: Shadows of Doubt. Dawn crept over the horizon, spilling silver light across the remnants of the battlefield. The scent of blood and smoke clung to the trees, a grim reminder of the night's violence. Aria walked among the wounded, limbs stiff, muscles sore, but her senses were alive in a way they had never been before. Every rustle, every footfall, every heartbeat pulsed in tandem with Hunter's presence through the bond. It was unsettling, invasive, yet it made her aware, sharper, stronger. She hated that she couldn't fully separate herself from it. Hunter appeared beside her without a sound, as if materializing from the mist. His eyes scanned the area, alert, wary, yet the tension in his shoulders softened slightly when he looked at her. The bond hummed between them, a tether that had grown louder, more insistent during the night's chaos. Aria tried to resist it, tried to ground herself in anger, but it was like fighting the tide of the ocean, inevitable, overpowering. "You pushed yourself too hard," Hunter murmured, voice low, almost a whisper that only she could hear. "You can't keep doing this without risking more than scratches." She met his gaze, teeth clenched. "I'm not fragile. I survived. That's what matters." He shook his head slowly. "It's not enough. Survival is the baseline. We can't afford to just survive anymore, not with what's coming." A chill ran down her spine at the gravity in his words. Even before the rogue attacks, she had sensed something shifting, something darker lurking beyond the immediate threat. The bond had amplified that awareness, whispering warnings she could not ignore. And yet each time she tried to retreat, to pull away, it only drew her closer to him, closer to the life she had long feared to embrace. A sudden rustle drew their attention. A lone scout returned, breathless, eyes wide with panic. "Alpha, Aria, the Southern Ridge, rogues, they're regrouping, more than last night." Hunter's jaw tightened. He glanced at Aria, eyes flicking over her form. "We can't let them reach the village," he said, voice steady despite the storm of worry beneath it. "We'll split the pack, take the high ground, set traps. You stay with me, the bond. I'll guide you through this." Aria's stomach twisted. The bond was no longer optional. It was a tool, a weapon, a conduit for strength she didn't yet trust. "Fine," she said, attempting to mask the tremor in her claws. "But I'm not just going to stand there like a puppet." Hunter's eyes softened briefly, betraying the faintest hint of vulnerability. "I know. That's why I need you here, not because of the bond, because of you." For a moment, the tension between them faltered, replaced by something more fragile, more intimate. But the pause was fleeting. Danger didn't wait for hesitation. They moved swiftly, Aria's senses heightened, the bond syncing their movements in a silent, seamless rhythm. Every whisper of wind, every crack of twigs underfoot, every subtle shift in the shadows became a signal. And as they approached the southern ridge, the first rogue scouts emerged, hissing and snapping in the dim morning light. The battle was chaotic, violent, instinct-driven. Aria leapt, claws extended, dodging a rogue that lunged from the underbrush. Hunter was a heartbeat away, his presence anchoring her, guiding her strikes with uncanny precision. They were attuned in ways neither fully understood, partners not by choice, but by force of circumstance and the unyielding bond threading them together. Even amid the combat, her mind raced. The rogues were organized, strategic, almost impossibly coordinated. Someone was directing them, watching, planning. The attacks were no longer random, they were deliberate, surgical, and terrifyingly personal. And with each rogue they dispatched, Aria felt a shadow of unease creep deeper into her bones. They were being lured, tested, prodded. Someone wanted them divided. Someone wanted to see her fall. Hunter's low growl snapped her back to the present. A rogue had flanked her, claws aimed for her side. Instinct took over, the bond flared, a surge of strength and awareness coursing through her. She dodged, twisted, struck, a coordinated movement guided by both her skill and the unseen tether, linking her to Hunter. The rogue crumpled to the ground, subdued, and for a moment, there was silence. Breathless, she glanced at Hunter. His chest heaved, jaw tight, eyes scanning the perimeter. "You're learning," he said quietly, almost like a confession. "Faster, sharper, more aware." Aria swallowed, the words hitting her harder than she expected. She had been resisting, pushing, fighting the bond, and yet it had made her stronger, more capable, and she hated herself a little for acknowledging it. The bond wasn't a curse, it was a weapon. But trusting it meant trusting him. and she had no desire to let anyone inside that deeply. Not after everything. The scout returned, this time with urgent news. Alpha, the main force is approaching. They've set fire to the eastern ridge. Villagers are trapped. Hunter's expression darkened. Then we move now. His hand brushed against hers, brief and fleeting, yet enough to send a jolt through her chest. The bond reacted violently, awareness flooding her senses. She pulled back slightly, forcing herself to focus. There would be time later to deal with emotions. Survival came first. Together, they led the pack toward the eastern ridge, coordinating attacks, setting traps, guiding villagers to safety. The bond hummed beneath her skin, a constant reminder of Hunter's presence, of their connection, and of the unspoken truth she had yet to face. The bond demanded acknowledgement, cooperation, surrender. And the more she resisted, the more she realized it was already shaping her, body, mind, and heart. When the last villagers were safe, the rogues finally retreated, leaving smoldering earth and shattered trees in their wake. Aria stood beside Hunter, breathing hard, muscles aching, eyes scanning the aftermath. The forest was quiet once more, but the tension lingered, electric, alive, unyielding. Hunter's gaze met hers, steady, unwavering. "This was only the beginning," he said softly. "The bond, the attacks, the darkness waiting in the shadows, it's coming for us, all of us, and it will test you in ways you're not ready for." Aria's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to deny, to retreat into safety. But deep down, she knew the truth. Her life had changed irreversibly. The bond, Hunter, the rogues, they were all part of a reality she could no longer ignore. And with the rising sun casting pale light over the battlefield, she realized that surrender was inevitable. Not to Hunter, not to the bond, but to the life that awaited her, dangerous, uncertain, and unrelentingly real. The forest exhaled in silence, shadows stretching long across the broken ground. And as Aria traced the path ahead, she understood one inescapable truth: survival was not enough. Power, awareness, and choice were now her only means to endure what the future held, and the bond would be both her weapon and her prison. Chapter 5: Fractured Alliance. The forest seemed quieter now, but the silence was deceptive. Ash drifted from the smoldering ridge, coating Aria's boots with fine gray powder. Every sense remained alert, taut like a drawn bowstring, yet her exhaustion threatened to tip her into recklessness. Hunter moved ahead, his posture rigid, every step deliberate. The bond thrummed between them, insistent and unyielding. "Stay close," he said without looking back. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority that left no room for argument. Aria's jaw tightened. She didn't like being ordered, didn't like the weight of their connection dictating her movements. And yet, when she stepped too far back, the bond pulled her forward, aligning her with his path, her instincts tethered to his. They reached a narrow clearing where a shallow stream cut through the underbrush. Hunter knelt, listening, sniffing the air like a predator. The bond flared sharply in alarm that only she could feel. Aria froze, muscles rigid. She hadn't anticipated this sudden synchronization, the way the bond forced her to feel his awareness as her own. "Rogues," Hunter muttered, eyes narrowing. "They're close, too close." Aria's pulse quickened, a mixture of irritation and adrenaline coursing through her. "Then why are we standing here?" "Move." Her voice was sharper than intended, the bond responded, pulling at her focus, and for the first time she felt her frustration mirrored in his presence. Hunter shot her a glance, calm but piercing. "Control yourself. This isn't just about brute force, they're testing us." She bristled. "Testing us, or you, or me, or the bond." Her words hung between them, sharp edges slicing the fragile truce that had formed in the heat of battle. Hunter's eyes darkened. Maybe all three. A sudden rustle from the tree line cut their argument short. Shadows flitted between the trees' rogues, moving with terrifying precision. Aria's heart raced as she drew in a steadying breath, claws flexing instinctively. Hunter was already moving, his steps fluid, almost seamless, and the bond flared violently. She felt herself drawn into a rhythm she didn't fully understand, compelled to match his movements even as her mind screamed against it. The first rogue lunged, and instinct took over. Aria ducked, twisted, struck a coordinated dance of offense and defense guided by the bond. She was aware of Hunter beside her but not controlling her, just sinking, nudging, whispering commands through the invisible thread that connected them. It was unnerving, intimate, and powerful. But then, something unexpected happened. A rogue slipped past her guard, striking at Hunter from the flank. Instinctively, she reacted, but the bond pulled her attention in multiple directions. She froze for a fraction of a second, a mistake that almost cost him. Hunter staggered, recovering quickly, but anger and frustration burned in his eyes. "You hesitated," he growled, low and dangerous. Aria's chest heaved. "I didn't," the bond. Her words faltered. It was difficult to explain how the thread that connected them could both empower and distract her, how it made her simultaneously stronger and vulnerable. Hunter's gaze softened slightly, but the tension remained. It's not about hesitation, it's about trust. You have to trust yourself and the bond, or we'll never make it through the next wave. Aria swallowed, fury and resentment coiling inside her. Trust. That word was heavy with implications she wasn't ready to confront. And yet, the bond thrummed insistently, a living pulse urging her to accept, to align, to surrender in ways she had refused to admit. The rogue attacks escalated, pressing them back toward the stream. The water reflected the dappled sunlight broken by falling ash, as if the forest itself was fractured by their conflict. Hunter and Aria fought side by side, their movements imperfect, jagged, each misstep amplifying the danger. For the first time, Aria realized that cooperation wasn't just about strength, it was about understanding, about anticipating the unseen, about reading the silent cues that only the bond could transmit. A rogue leapt from above, and Hunter's warning came too late. Aria lunged instinctively, catching the attacker with her claws just in time, throwing him into the shallow stream with a splash. Heart racing, she realized the bond had guided her strike, even as she had resisted it. And with that realization came an uncomfortable truth. The bond didn't just link them physically, it linked their instincts, their reactions, their very survival. When the last rogue was pushed back into the tree line, leaving only the echoes of their retreat, Aria and Hunter stood in the clearing, drenched in sweat, lungs burning, muscles trembling. Neither spoke at first. The bond pulsed between them, heavy with unspoken words, with questions neither could yet answer. Finally, Hunter broke the silence. "We can't keep fighting like this. Individually, we're strong. Together, we're unpredictable." He paused, gaze intense, searching hers. "If we're going to survive what's coming, we need more than coordination. We need trust, and you need to stop fighting the bond, or it will cost you everything." Aria's stomach twisted. She wanted to deny it, to insist that she was strong enough alone. But the truth was undeniable. The bond had saved her more times than she could count, had guided her through near-fatal mistakes, had forced her to see the world differently, more acutely, more dangerously, and resisting it was no longer an option. It was a liability. Her voice was quiet, almost reluctant. I'll try." Hunter's eyes softened, just a fraction, but it was enough. "That's all I ask for now." As they moved back toward the pack's encampment, Aria's mind swirled with uncertainty, fear, and a begrudging acknowledgement of the bond's power. Shadows of doubt lingered, but the first crack in her resistance had appeared, and she knew, deep down, that the coming days would test her in ways she had never imagined, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The rogue attacks were no longer random, they were orchestrated, deliberate, personal. And the bond between Aria and Hunter was no longer just a tether. It was a battlefield in itself, fraught with tension, potential, and the unspoken promise of both peril and connection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows over the forest floor, Aria realized the truth she could no longer deny. Survival would demand surrender, and surrender would demand courage. Courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Not yet. Chapter 6. Bound in shadow. The moon had risen, silver and indifferent, casting its light over the twisted canopy of the forest. Shadows danced between the trees as the cool night wind whispered secrets that only the pack could hear. Aria's boots pressed into the soft earth, leaves crunching beneath each step. She tried to keep her breathing steady, though the bond pulsed through her chest like a living thing, insistent, demanding, unrelenting. Hunter walked beside her, silent, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning every shadow. Every now and then the bond flared, tugging at her mind, syncing her heartbeat with his. She resisted, twisting against it, but the thread was stronger than her stubbornness, pulling her forward into alignment, into proximity, into shared awareness. "We need to move faster," Hunter said, his voice low, edged with tension. "They're watching." Aria's stomach clenched. "I'm moving as fast as I can. Don't treat me like I'm helpless." Her words were sharp, defensive, but the bond shivered in response, making her skin tingle as if the forest itself had taken notice of her irritation. Hunter's gaze flicked to her, piercing in the moonlight. "I'm not doubting you. I'm warning you." The stream they had fought beside hours earlier wound into the clearing, its surface shimmering like shattered glass. The rogue attacks had forced the pack into defensive maneuvers, and now every step felt precarious, every sound a potential ambush. Aria flexed her claws beneath her fingertips, instincts coiling in preparation. A rustle, closer this time. Hunter froze, pulling her down behind a fallen log. Aria's heart hammered, adrenaline mingling with something darker, the persistent, invasive tug of the bond. She could feel his tension, his alertness, and for the first time, she understood how inseparable they had become in these moments of danger. Two rogues emerged from the underbrush, swift and silent. Aria's claws slashed in a practiced arc, muscles moving before her mind could catch up. Hunter reacted simultaneously, his own strikes precise and lethal. The bond pulsed, synchronizing their movements, forcing a choreography neither had rehearsed. But then a third rogue attacked from behind. Aria's senses screamed, warning her of the threat, but the bond distracted her, tugging at her focus. forcing her to anticipate Hunter's needs as well as her own. She pivoted, barely blocking the strike with the sharp edge of her claw, and twisted to counter. Hunter growled, low and controlled. "Stop resisting it," her teeth clenched. "I can't, you can." His voice was both command and plea, vibrating through the bond, embedding in her bones. "Trust me, trust the bond. Right now." The words hit her like a shockwave. She inhaled sharply, surrendering not entirely, but enough for the bond to flare brightly, uniting their instincts. In a fluid, violent dance, they pushed the rogues back, their movements entwined, powerful, terrifyingly precise. When the last rogue fell into the shadows, silence returned, thick and oppressive. Aria's chest heaved, sweat slicking her skin, muscles trembling with exertion. She looked at Hunter, who stared at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. The bond pulsed insistently between them, a reminder of their inescapable connection. "Do you see now?" Hunter's voice was softer, almost intimate. "We're stronger together. The bond isn't a cage, it's a weapon, and we need it, or we'll die before the next attack." Aria wanted to argue, wanted to reject the truth. But the thread hummed with undeniable energy, the echo of shared danger, shared survival. Her resistance felt foolish, impotent in the face of such raw necessity. I understand," she admitted quietly, though her pride bristled with every word. I don't know if I can fully trust it yet." Hunter's gaze softened slightly. "You don't have to trust it completely yet, just enough to survive." The night pressed on, each step taking them deeper into the rogue territory. The bond pulsed with warnings, premonitions of ambushes yet to come, of challenges yet to be faced. Aria felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration, fear of what lurked in the darkness, exhilaration in discovering the depths of her own strength, and the undeniable, magnetic pull toward Hunter that she could no longer ignore. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. The forest had a way of distorting time when danger pressed close. They reached the outskirts of the rogues' territory, a jagged scar across the landscape where the land itself seemed wounded. Hunter signaled her to stop. "They're preparing for something," he said, eyes narrowing. "Something bigger, and they know we're coming." Aria swallowed, her stomach tight with a mix of dread and anticipation. "Then we need a plan," Hunter nodded. "Yes, and for that we need to stop seeing the bond as a threat and start seeing it as a guide." Her pulse raced. The bond pulsed in agreement, a rhythmic reminder of shared instinct and inevitable connection. She didn't like it, she didn't fully trust it, but for the first time she understood that resisting it entirely could mean their end. As they crouched in the shadows, watching the rogue encampment in the distance, Aria realized a chilling truth. The bond wasn't just a link between them, it was a battlefield, a test, a force that would challenge every instinct, every fear, every desire she had. And survival would demand surrender she wasn't yet certain she was ready to give. But the rogues were coming, and she had no choice but to prepare. Chapter 7, Rogue Siege. The forest was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, a heavy curtain of mist curling between the trunks. Every shadow seemed to quiver with menace, and Aria's senses were sharpened to their limits. Her bond with Hunter pulsed like a living heartbeat, tethering her to him in ways she couldn't deny, even when her pride screamed to resist. Hunter moved ahead with careful precision, ears swiveling, eyes scanning. His presence was both reassuring and suffocating, every motion of his mirrored in her mind through the bond. She could feel his tension, his unspoken strategies, and it made her chest tighten in an almost unbearable rhythm. "They're here," he whispered, barely audible, his teeth grazing his lower lip. "We've walked into the center of their trap." Aria's claws flexed. Her instincts screamed to run, but the bond insisted she stay, keep moving, trust him. The rogue camp lay ahead, jagged and sprawling, tents erected from scavenged debris, flames flickering in the cold night. Figures moved in the shadows, dozens of them, silent predators waiting for the right moment to strike. A low growl emanated from Hunter's chest. "We'll have to draw them out, one by one," Aria swallowed, tension coiling in her gut. "And if they overwhelm us?" Hunter's gaze locked on hers, sharp and commanding. "We won't let that happen, not if we fight together." The bond pulsed at her awareness, thrumming with urgency. She felt it, felt him, felt the connection they could no longer ignore. Fear twisted with something else, something intoxicating. A pulse of adrenaline that made her acutely aware of every inch of him. She hated the feeling, yet couldn't escape it. Hunter signaled her to split, to flank the camp. Aria obeyed, moving silently through the underbrush, ears attuned to every rustle, every breath. The bond guided her, whispering Hunter's awareness into her mind, warning her of unseen dangers, syncing their movements as if they were two halves of a single entity. A rogue stepped into the firelight ahead, unaware of her presence. Aria's claws flashed, silencing him before he could react. The bond pulsed violently, approving, urging her forward. Every kill, every movement was mirrored by Hunter in real time, a dance of life and death choreographed by the bond's relentless pull. Suddenly, a shriek pierced the night. Aria froze, recognizing the sound of a pack member in distress. Hunter's voice flared in her mind, urgent, protective. Aria, behind you. A group of rogues lunged from the shadows. She spun, claws slashing, muscles burning. The bond synchronized her movements with Hunter's, their attacks brutal and precise. It was no longer just survival, it was unity in violence, a terrifying harmony that neither fully understood but both could feel. Hunter's presence was overwhelming, his thoughts brushing against hers with every strike, every dodge, every breath. She tried to push back, to assert independence. But the bond was insistent, unyielding, and for the first time she realized the depth of their connection. Resistance wasn't possible, not here, not now. When the last rogue fell, silence descended, heavy and suffocating. Aria's chest heaved, sweat slicking her skin, her claws quivering. Hunter approached, eyes dark and unrelenting, the bond between them thrumming with residual energy. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly, almost a murmur, though it vibrated in her mind like a command. "Stronger than you've allowed yourself to be." Aria's lips parted, but she couldn't speak, couldn't articulate the mixture of fear, exhilaration, and the unfamiliar pull of something more. The bond hummed insistently, demanding acknowledgement, forcing awareness of feelings she had been trying to suppress. Hunter knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We survived," he said, tone both gentle and insistent. "And we'll survive the next one too. But you need to trust the bond." Aria met his gaze, her pulse quickening in a rhythm she couldn't control. She wanted to resist, to assert her independence, to deny the pull, but the bond was a living force, insistent, persuasive, and undeniable. I'll try," she admitted, voice trembling with a mixture of defiance and submission. Hunter's lips curved slightly approving, though his eyes were still fierce. "Try is enough for now. Soon you'll see there's no other choice." The wind shifted, carrying with it a new scent, different, sharper, darker. Aria's eyes narrowed. "Something's coming, something worse." Hunter's expression hardened. "Then we prepare." Together, the bond thrummed between them, a silent promise, a chain of fire and shadow that neither could escape. Outside, the forest waited, patient and indifferent. But Aria knew one truth with chilling clarity: survival would demand surrender, and surrender would demand trust. Whether she wanted to or not, the bond had chosen them. Chapter 8, The Hidden Betrayal. The aftermath of the rogue siege left the pack shaken. Bodies lay scattered across the forest floor, the smell of blood mingling with the damp moss and the acrid scent of smoke. Aria moved cautiously among the wounded, her senses on high alert. The bond pulsed like a second heartbeat, syncing her awareness with Hunter's. Every subtle shift of his posture, every flicker in his expression reached her mind before his words did. A constant reminder that they were inextricably linked. Hunter knelt beside a young wolf with a gash across his shoulder. "Stay with me," he murmured, pressing a hand to the wound. His voice was calm, controlled, but Aria could feel the strain beneath it, a tension that mirrored her own. The bond throbbed with unspoken anxiety, urging her to remain vigilant. Aria's eyes scanned the perimeter. Something felt off, too calculated, too precise. The rogues had attacked with coordination that was almost familiar. Her instincts screamed at her, and the bond amplified that warning, sending a sharp, insistent pulse through her chest. "Hunter," she said quietly, stepping closer. "They weren't just random. Someone inside the pack helped them." His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "A traitor." Aria's pulse quickened. "Yes, I can feel it. The bond, it's reacting. Someone is masking themselves, hiding within the pack. They've been guiding the rogues, feeding them information." Hunter stood, the shift from calm alpha to calculating predator instantaneous. "Then we find them before they strike again. No one else gets hurt because of this." They moved through the camp silently, every shadow a potential threat. The bond thrummed, tugging at Aria with each step, pulling her closer to Hunter, even as her mind resisted. She hated the way it made her aware of his presence, his heartbeat, his intentions, but she couldn't ignore it. The bond demanded attention, and in the face of danger, denial was impossible. Hunter's hand brushed against hers almost accidentally, and the bond flared. A shock of heat raced through her veins, leaving her momentarily breathless. She looked away, trying to ground herself, but the sensation lingered, insistent and intrusive. "There," Hunter whispered, pointing to a tent partially hidden among the trees. The fabric flapped unnaturally, betraying movement inside. Aria crouched beside him, claws unsheathed, senses straining. "Two," she said, voice low. "Inside." Hunter nodded, eyes darkening. "We take them down together." They breached the tent in perfect synchrony, a deadly duet of wolf and human, alpha and mate. The first figure stumbled back, a knife in hand, only to be thrown aside with forceful precision. The second lunged, but Aria anticipated the move, her reflexes honed by instinct and bond alike. They disarmed the rogue before he could strike, subduing him quickly. Hunter's eyes scanned the room, sharp and accusing. "Who sent you?" The first rogue spat blood, defiance in his eyes. "We were promised protection and power. Someone in your pack will pay for what they've done." Aria's stomach twisted. "Inside the pack," she repeated. voice trembling with realization. The bond pulsed violently, demanding urgency. They were closer than she feared, but who? Hunter's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly, as it met hers. We'll uncover them. Together. For the first time, Aria didn't resist the warmth that the bond brought her. She leaned slightly into his presence, letting the shared awareness guide her, the heat of it a sharp contrast to the cold tension of betrayal. She was learning to harness it, to feel it without losing herself entirely, and it was terrifying. The night stretched on, whispers of treachery weaving through the camp like a shadow. Every member became a suspect, every glance a potential lie. Aria's mind raced, connecting pieces, following threads that only the bond made visible. She realized that the attacks were more than a test of strength. They were designed to weaken trust, to fracture the pack from within. Hunter placed a hand on her shoulder. We can't let them win. Not now. Aria nodded, determination hardening her features. Then we hunt them, and we protect everyone we can. The bond hummed with approval, thrumming through her veins, a relentless reminder that whatever the threat, they were stronger together. The rogue siege had ended, but the war had just begun, and Aria for the first time understood that her true power wasn't just in her claws or her instincts. It was in the bond that connected her to Hunter, a force she could no longer ignore. As dawn broke over the forest, the first rays of light illuminating the carnage, Aria felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The betrayal was close, dangerous, and the rogues were only the beginning. But with Hunter at her side and the bond guiding her, she knew one truth: survival demanded trust, and trust demanded courage. And for the first time she was ready to fight, not just for herself, but for everyone she cared about. Chapter 9: Shadows Within. The forest was eerily silent, the morning mist curling around twisted roots and shattered branches like a living thing. Aria moved with cautious steps, the bond thrumming insistently beneath her skin, alerting her to every subtle movement, every hidden breath. Hunter walked beside her, his gaze sweeping the tree line, muscles taut beneath his uniform, always ready. Their synchronization had become instinctual, bond and alpha in seamless harmony. Something's off, Aria murmured, crouching near a broken tree. Her instincts screamed that the rogue attack had been more than just a random strike. Someone was orchestrating from within, guiding them, shaping chaos to their advantage. Hunter nodded silently, acknowledging her intuition without a word. The bond vibrated between them, a silent pulse that heightened every awareness. They reached the edge of the camp where the wounded were still receiving care, and Aria's eyes swept the faces of the pack members. Trust was fragile here, suspicion hung in the air like smoke. Split up, Hunter said finally, his tone calm but commanding. We cover more ground. Keep the bond active, don't let it fade. Aria inhaled sharply. It was becoming more than instinct. She could almost feel the hidden hand behind the attacks tugging at the threads of the pack. Each heartbeat, each breath seemed to carry a message she couldn't yet decipher. She moved silently, ears straining, eyes scanning for movement. Shadows shifted unnaturally in the mist, and every sound a snapping twig, a distant caw set her nerves on edge. Hours passed. The bond pulsed with tension, a steady hum warning her of something lurking nearby. And then, a whisper in the underbrush, a familiar scent, subtle but unmistakable. Someone from within. The rogues were no longer the primary threat, the real danger had walked among them all along. Hunter emerged silently from the fog, senses alert, eyes narrowing. I felt it, he said. Close. Aria pointed to a figure crouched behind a boulder, cloaked in shadow, observing them. Her claws flexed instinctively. There, she whispered, heart hammering. The figure bolted, and the bond flared with heat and urgency. They gave chase, moving like ghosts through the mist, silent and deadly. Hunter's hand brushed hers again. A brief spark that ignited something in her chest, part fear, part undeniable connection. She pushed it aside, focusing on the hunt. The rogue led them to a hidden cave, its entrance masked by roots and undergrowth. Aria felt the bond tighten, pulling her forward, guiding her movements with precision. Hunter entered first, his presence a shield, his instincts alert to every potential threat. Inside, the air was thick and damp. Shadows clung to the walls, shifting unnaturally as if alive. And there, at the far end of the cave, stood the figure, a pack member, their eyes cold. Calculating. Betrayal burned like ice through Aria's veins. The bond pulsed violently, warning her that this confrontation would test them in ways neither had anticipated. You shouldn't have followed me, the figure said, voice low and venomous. You have no idea what's at stake. Hunter stepped forward, eyes narrowed, stance unwavering. Explain now, the figure smirked. The rogues, they're just pawns. The real game has only begun. And you, Hunter, and you, little mate, you have no idea how much you've underestimated your own pack. Aria's stomach twisted, her mind racing. The bond flared, reacting to the surge of danger, connecting her instincts directly to Hunter's. They were linked in a way that no physical proximity could match. Thoughts, intentions, and even subtle emotions flowed between them, amplifying their awareness. What do you want? Hunter demanded, voice low but dangerous. The figure's eyes gleamed. Control, power, and the chaos you've tried to suppress will be the very thing that destroys you. The cave seemed to shrink around them, shadows lengthening, flickering in the dim light. The bond pulsed sharply, and Aria realized, with a clarity that made her stomach drop, that this was only the beginning. The rogues, the hidden traitor, the manipulation, all threads in a larger, darker tapestry designed to ensnare them both. Hunter's hand found hers, fingers curling around hers with protective strength. The bond flared, a wave of heat and energy. And for the first time, Aria allowed herself to feel the connection fully, not just as an obligation or a curse, but as a weapon, a shield, and a guide. Together they were stronger than the shadows around them. The figure laughed, sharp and echoing, a sound that promised more danger than either had faced before. You think you can stop it? You've only seen the surface. The real power, the one that will break your pack and your bond, is yet to come. Aria swallowed, her heart hammering. She could feel the truth in the bond's warning. Survival would demand every ounce of courage, every shred of trust, and every spark of the power she had yet to fully understand. Hunter's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. Then we'll face it. Together. The cave echoed with the figure's laughter as they vanished into the shadows, leaving Aria and Hunter standing amidst the thickening tension. The bond hummed, alive and insistent, reminding her that danger lurked closer than ever. But so did connection, power, and a force that neither shadow nor traitor could sever. Dawn's first light filtered into the cave, painting the walls with pale gold. Aria inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of responsibility settle firmly on her shoulders. This betrayal, this darkness, it would not defeat them. Not if they stood together, and the bond would be their weapon, their guide, and their anchor. The hunt had only begun, but for the first time, Aria felt ready. Chapter 10. The Fractured Alliance. The sun had barely risen over Havermouth when Aria returned to the pack's camp, the weight of the night pressing against her chest like a stone. Hunter walked beside her, silent, his jaw tight, eyes scanning every shadow, every figure that moved in the flickering morning light. The bond thrummed violently between them, resonating with unspoken urgency. Inside the council hall, murmurs filled the air. Pack members avoided direct eye contact, their whispers weaving tension thicker than any fog. Aria felt it, the subtle undercurrent of suspicion, the unspoken accusations lingering like smoke. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, every glance laden with 1,000 unsaid threats. Hunter stepped forward, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. The gesture was grounding, tethering her in a way that the bond demanded. "Stay close," he murmured, his voice low but steady. "We face them together." The Alpha Council had convened earlier than usual. Rumors of a traitor had spread like wildfire, and the pack's unity was fragile, frayed at the edges. Aria's pulse quickened as she scanned the room, noting the silent alliances and the covert glances. The rogue attacks were no longer just external threats. They had seeded distrust within the very heart of the pack. "Alpha Hunter," one of the council members began, voice cautious, eyes darting toward Aria. "With the recent events, we must consider whether the pack is ready to follow your lead if the bond between you and your mate complicates judgment." Hunter's gaze hardened, unwavering. "The bond does not hinder my leadership," he said firmly. "It strengthens it. And my mate Aria is no threat to the pack. In fact, she is our greatest asset. If any of you doubt that, I suggest you watch closely before passing judgment." Aria felt the bond surge, a warm pulsing energy connecting her to Hunter's resolve. She straightened, lifting her chin with a newfound confidence. The pack's uncertainty prickled at her nerves, but the bond reminded her that she wasn't alone. They would face the storm together, but the council was relentless. Questions came fast, sharp, designed to provoke hesitation. "What if the rogue attacks are connected to your bond?" another council member pressed. "How can we trust that she?" Aria stepped forward, her voice calm yet unwavering. "The bond doesn't make me a pawn," she said. "It doesn't control me. It connects me to Hunter. Yes, but it also makes me stronger. I can sense threats before they strike. I can protect this pack if given the chance." A tense silence followed, broken only by the creaking of the hall and the faint rustle of distant trees outside. Then, slowly, council members shifted, some in grudging acknowledgement, others with barely concealed skepticism. Hunter's hand brushed hers beneath the table, grounding her again. The bond flared a quiet reassurance, a reminder that together they could face even the deepest fractures. Later, Aria wandered to the training grounds, away from the council's scrutinizing eyes. She needed to understand the extent of her power, the limits of the bond, and how to harness it before the next rogue strike. The forest stretched around her, alive with morning light and shadowed whispers. She closed her eyes, letting the bond guide her movements. Hunter's presence became a lifeline, his energy mingling with hers, amplifying reflexes and perception. With every deep breath she felt more connected, more attuned. Not just to Hunter, but to the pack, to the land itself. Shadows shifted in the corners of her vision, warning her, alerting her. Then a sudden flicker, a rogue silhouette darting between trees. Aria's claws flexed, instincts honed by the bond. Hunter appeared at her side instantly, eyes sharp, muscles coiled for action. They moved as one, silent and lethal, flanking the intruder with unerring precision. The figure was gone before they could strike. A phantom warning, a message that the threat was more organized, more insidious than they had realized. The bond flared again, hot and urgent, urging vigilance, signaling danger lurking closer than ever. Aria's chest heaved, not from exertion but anticipation. The rogue attacks were only the beginning. The fracture within the pack, the hidden traitor, and the growing power within herself, all threads of a web that threatened to ensnare them. Yet, for the first time, she felt the bond not as a burden but as a weapon, a guide, a lifeline. Hunter's hand found hers, fingers curling around hers with protective strength. The bond pulsed in response. A symphony of potential, warning, and promise. Together, they were more than pack and mate. They were a force that even shadows and traitors would have to reckon with. As the sun climbed higher, spilling light across the clearing, Aria realized that the real test wasn't the rogues. It was the fractures within, the whispers and the betrayals yet to come. And for the first time she felt ready to face them, armed with the bond, her instincts, and an unshakable resolve. Chapter 11, Edge of Shadows. Night fell over Havermouth like a velvet shroud, thick with anticipation and the scent of wet earth. Aria's senses hummed, every whisper of wind carrying the faintest trace of movement, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. The bond pulsed against her chest, urgent, insistent. Hunter walked beside her, silent, his presence grounding yet electric, a tether between caution and instinct. "Something's coming," he murmured, his eyes narrowing into the darkness. Closer than before. Aria's heart thudded, not with fear but with adrenaline. She had felt it too, the rogue shadow lurking beyond the trees, calculating, patient. They were being hunted, and the hunter had become the hunted. The clearing opened before them, moonlight spilling across dew-soaked grass. Aria stepped forward, muscles coiled, claws flexing under her skin. The bond hummed, weaving their movements together, syncing breath and heartbeat. With Hunter at her side, she felt invincible, yet the knot of unease in her stomach reminded her this was only the beginning. A figure emerged from the shadows, swift, silent, a predator in its own right. Aria reacted instantly, pivoting to flank it. Hunter mirrored her movement, their synchronization seamless, almost instinctive. "Don't let it escape," he whispered, the urgency in his voice threading through the bond. The rogue lunged, but Aria anticipated the attack. She sidestepped, claws slashing through the air where the creature had aimed. Hunter intercepted another strike, his strength and precision amplified by the bond. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, each movement deliberate, each breath measured. The rogue retreated into the darkness, leaving only a fleeting shadow and a single warning, an unmistakable mark carved into the ground. A symbol of intent. Aria recognized it immediately. It wasn't random. Someone was orchestrating these attacks, and the pack itself was in danger from more than just external threats. Hunter's hand found hers, gripping tightly. "They're testing us," he said, voice low, almost reverent in its intensity. "They want to see how far we'll go, how much we can endure." Aria nodded, feeling the bond surge. It was more than a connection. It was a lifeline, a source of clarity amid chaos. She could sense Hunter's determination, his unspoken fear, and his unwavering commitment. The bond didn't just link them. It amplified their strength, highlighted their weaknesses, and demanded absolute trust. The moon climbed higher, illuminating the clearing in silver light. Aria felt a shift within herself, a growing awareness of the power the bond offered. She could feel the rogue's presence lingering, faint but persistent, threading through the shadows like smoke. It was a reminder that danger was never far, that survival required not just skill but instinct and courage. Hunter's voice broke through her thoughts. "We need to warn the pack. They won't understand the scope of this threat until it's nearly too late." Aria's mind raced, calculating, planning, connecting the fragments of information she'd gathered. The rogue attacks, the hidden traitor, the fractures within the council, all threads of a web that threatened to consume everything she loved, yet, for the first time, she felt not fear, but purpose. "Then we act," she said firmly, the bond flaring in response, a living pulse of energy, together. Hunter's eyes met hers, a silent agreement passing between them. The bond throbbed, not just with power but with promise, a reminder that even in darkness they were stronger united. As they moved through the forest, shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, whispering of threats yet unseen. Aria's claws flexed, her senses sharp, her mind alert. The edge of shadows had become their domain, a place where only the quick, the cunning, and the bonded could survive. And for the first time, Aria understood the rogue attacks were only the beginning. The true challenge lay ahead, in the unseen, in the betrayals that lingered within, and in the fire that the bond demanded they wield. With Hunter at her side and the bond coursing through her, she stepped into the darkness, ready to confront whatever awaited them, knowing that survival and victory would depend on trust, instinct, and the strength of their connection. Chapter 12, Secrets Among Shadows. The forest was silent, almost too silent, as Aria and Hunter moved through the underbrush. The bond pulsed like a living heartbeat, syncing their steps, their senses, their very instinct. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, every whisper of wind carried a warning. "They're inside the pack," Aria said finally, her voice barely above a breath. She could feel treachery lurking closer than they wanted to admit. The rogue attacks were not random. Someone with knowledge of their strengths and weaknesses was orchestrating them. Hunter's jaw tightened. "I've suspected as much. But this," he gestured toward the village ahead, lights flickering in the night. "This is worse than I imagined." Aria's eyes narrowed. Something was off. The council's presence seemed diminished. Patrols misaligned. She could sense tension, unspoken fears circulating like poison. Every face they passed carried hidden calculations. Trust was thin. A rustle behind them made them spin simultaneously. Instincts sharp, claws half extended. Nothing but a fox darting into the undergrowth. But the adrenaline didn't fade. It only heightened awareness. The bond flared, urgent, whispering warnings they could not ignore. Hunter's hand brushed hers, grounding her. "We need to find out who's feeding information to the rogues. If the traitor isn't stopped, the pack will crumble from within before we even face the external threat." Aria swallowed, her throat tight, her thoughts a whirl of strategy and suspicion. "And if it's someone we know, someone we've trusted?" Hunter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he led her toward the council hall, shadows stretching behind them like dark fingers. Inside, the air was thick with unease. Members shifted uneasily, whispers lacing the room like threads of a secret cloth. Every eye seemed to hold a question, every gesture a possible lie. Aria's pulse quickened. She had to move carefully. Every misstep could expose her, could give the traitor the advantage. The bond hummed, protective and insistent. It urged caution but also clarity, cutting through the fear like a blade of light. "Listen," Hunter murmured, voice low. "We'll need to split, cover different angles. I'll check the perimeter, see if any outsiders have infiltrated our patrols. You," he hesitated, gaze locking with hers, "you need to stay close to the council. Observe, listen, catch the subtleties no one else notices." Aria nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The bond flared in agreement, pulling her closer to Hunter before she reluctantly moved toward the council members. Every whisper, every glance, every footstep became a clue. Minutes stretched, tension coiling like a spring ready to snap. Then, a subtle signal, almost imperceptible. A note slipped under the table near the council leader, unseen by all but Aria. She caught it, heart pounding, unfolding it carefully. The words inside confirmed her fears. The rogue attacks were being guided by someone within. Someone who knew their pack's deepest secrets, their weakest points, their hidden fears. A chill ran down her spine. The betrayal was closer than she'd feared, and the danger was no longer just outside the walls. It had infiltrated the heart of their world. Hunter returned, his presence, silent yet commanding. He saw the note in her hand and the grim set of her jaw. No words were needed. The bond flared between them, sharp, insistent, a shared understanding. The game had changed. Outside, the moon cast long shadows over the village, and Aria felt the weight of the revelation settle. The rogues were only the surface threat. The real battle was beneath, within, and survival would require cunning, courage, and the unbreakable bond that linked them. Together, they moved to confront the looming shadow, knowing that the next move could determine not only their lives but the fate of the entire pack. Chapter 13. The first betrayal dawn was a muted gray, the kind that made shadows stretch longer and whispers sound louder. Aria moved through the council hall with cautious steps, the note from the previous night burning in her pocket. Every glance from the council members now carried suspicion, every movement a potential lie. Hunter had gone to inspect the outer patrols, leaving her alone in a sea of watchful eyes. The bond flared softly, warning her, urging vigilance. She could feel it. The predator was not outside, it was here, inside, blending seamlessly among them. A sudden movement near the windows caught her attention. The youngest council member, Kyle, had paused mid-step, fingers brushing the sash at his side. Aria's instincts prickled. Something wasn't right. She followed him discreetly as he slipped through a hidden door leading to the lower archives, a place forbidden to most. Heart pounding, she crept after him. The air smelled faintly of damp stone and old parchment, a scent that usually brought calm, but now it carried tension. Kale reached the far end, producing a small black crystal from beneath his cloak. He muttered words in a tongue she didn't recognize, a faint glow igniting in the crystal. Aria's breath caught. The glow pulsed, responding to something unseen, and her mind raced. The rogues weren't acting alone. Someone was guiding them, arming them, feeding them intelligence, perhaps even controlling their movements. Before she could react, Kale turned sharply, sensing her presence. "Aria," his voice was smooth, deceptively calm. "I didn't think you'd follow." The bond flared violently, instinct screaming at her to flee, to strike, to warn Hunter. But she forced herself to remain composed. "Kale, what are you doing?" she demanded, voice steady despite the storm inside. Kyle's lips curved into a faint, cruel smile. "I serve the pack's future, even if it means breaking a few bonds along the way." The words hit her like ice. Betrayal tasted bitter on her tongue, twisting the stomach into knots. This was the first crack in the trust she had clung to, the first real proof that the danger within was as lethal as the rogue attacks themselves. Aria's claws extended, barely visible, as she took a defensive stance. "I won't let you hurt them," she said, voice trembling but firm. "Not if I can stop you." Kale laughed softly, the sound like dry leaves scraping stone. "Oh, Anaya, you still don't understand the game we're playing." He raised the crystal, and the glow intensified, illuminating the stone walls with eerie light, and soon neither will anyone else. A sudden crash from above, the ceiling trembled as a stone chandelier swung violently, a signal that Kale had allies nearby. Aria's instincts screamed. She was surrounded. The bond pulled her sharply toward the exit, toward Hunter, toward safety. But Kyle's glance warned her he would not let her go easily. The moment stretched, tension crackling in the air. She had a choice: fight alone and risk capture, or retreat, regroup, and expose the traitor before more lives were endangered. Her eyes darted to the narrow stairwell leading upward, the bond urging her to move, to survive, to protect. With a deep breath, she bolted, claws slicing through the stone wall as she ascended. Kale's laughter echoed behind her, following her like a shadow she couldn't shake. Outside, Hunter was already waiting, senses flaring, every muscle tense. The bond surged between them as she reached him, warning, urging, guiding. "Kale," she gasped, he's the one orchestrating everything." Hunter's eyes narrowed. "I knew it. But this is bigger than we thought." His hand found hers, grounding her. "We'll stop him, together." The rogue attacks, the traitor within the pack, the bond's everything was converging. The first betrayal had revealed itself, but Aria and Hunter now understood the true scale of the threat. And with every heartbeat, every shadow, the stakes grew higher. Outside, the forest held its breath. The game had begun, and neither predator nor prey could afford a single misstep. Chapter 14. The pack divided. The council chamber buzzed with uneasy murmurs, voices overlapping in worry and accusation. Aria stood at the back, eyes flicking between the faces she once trusted and the hidden unease lingering in their glances. Kale's betrayal had fractured the sense of unity, leaving the pack vulnerable not just to external threats but to the shadows within. Hunter's presence beside her grounded her, the bond pulsing between them with a mix of protective instinct and silent warning. His jaw was tight, eyes sharp as he listened to the council debate. Some argued for immediate lockdown, sealing the pack within the stronghold until the rogue threat was neutralized. Others called for retaliation, demanding to hunt down the traitor immediately. Aria's mind raced. She knew the danger of dividing their attention. The rogues thrived on chaos, on distraction, on doubt. But Kyle's treachery had sown more than fear, it had planted seeds of suspicion. Every glance over her shoulder, every subtle shift in posture, reminded her that the enemy could be anyone, anywhere. The bond flared sharply when a distant howl echoed through the chamber's open windows, the forest outside vibrating with an unnatural rhythm. Every wolf in the room tensed. It wasn't just a signal, it was a warning. The rogues were moving faster than anyone anticipated. Hunter leaned close, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "We need to split the pack, send the ones we can trust to the borders, the rest stay here." "I'll find Kale." Aria shook her head, unease prickling her skin. "We don't know if Kale is alone, he might have allies. Splitting the pack could play right into their hands." Hunter's eyes softened briefly then hardened. "I know. But waiting is riskier. I can track him, and you." He pressed his hand to her shoulder, bond pulsing in sync. "You stay here, protect the ones who can't protect themselves. That includes me if I fail." Aria swallowed hard. The thought of staying behind, of potentially facing the rogue attacks without him, churned her stomach. But the pull of the bond, fierce and demanding, reminded her that her strength was not just in proximity, it was in survival, strategy, and endurance. As the council made their decisions, Aria moved to the side chamber to check the pack's archives, seeking any clue Kala might have left behind. Dusty tomes and scrolls lined the shelves, their edges frayed from age. Yet some contained more than mere history. They held secrets, maps, and records of old alliances, forbidden rituals, and past betrayals. Hours passed, each tick of the clock hammering with the weight of impending disaster. Then she found it, a hidden ledger. Kyle's meticulous notes detailing shipments of weapons, locations of rogue camps, and coded messages meant to confuse and misdirect. Her pulse quickened. With this, they had a chance, but only if they moved carefully. Hunter returned just as she deciphered the first set of codes, the tension between them almost tangible. His eyes scanned the room, then softened as he saw her. "You found it." She nodded, sliding the ledger into her bag. "This could turn the tide, but we need a plan, and we need allies we can trust." Hunter placed a hand on her cheek, a grounding touch amidst the storm. "We'll get them together. No one gets left behind. Not this time." Outside, the forest seemed darker, the wind whispering secrets in tongues only wolves could sense. The pack was divided, yes, but Aria and Hunter knew one truth. Unity was fragile, and betrayal could come from the shadows at any moment. The first move had been made. The war for the pack and for their survival had begun. Chapter 15. Shadows in the forest. The forest breathed with an unsettling calm, each rustle of leaves carrying a hint of danger. Aria's senses were heightened, every shadow flickering like a threat. The bond with Hunter throbbed in her chest, demanding awareness, demanding action. He moved silently beside her, muscles coiled, eyes scanning the darkness with predatory precision. They followed the coded paths from Kale's ledger, each marker revealing hidden caches of weapons and secret passages the rogues used to evade detection. Every step deeper into the forest felt like stepping into the rogue's web, each sound amplified, the crack of a branch, the snap of a twig, the whisper of wind. Suddenly, a low growl sliced through the night, and Aria froze. Hunter's hand tightened around hers. Stay close. They're here. From the underbrush, shadows shifted unnaturally. Figures moved with lethal intent, their eyes glinting in the moonlight. Rogue wolves, larger and more feral than she had ever seen, encircled them, fangs bared, claws scraping the earth. Aria's pulse quickened, but fear was tempered by the bond, by the surge of power she had begun to understand. She could feel Hunter's intent, his readiness, his desperation to protect, and it ignited something fierce within her. The first rogue lunged. Aria reacted instinctively, her claws flashing, her wolf form barely contained beneath her human guise. She met it with a force she hadn't fully realized she possessed, throwing the attacker off balance. Hunter was already in motion, taking down another with a precision born of years of training and raw alpha instinct. But there were too many. The rogues pressed closer, testing their defenses, probing for weakness. Aria's mind raced. She couldn't rely solely on strength, she needed strategy. Using the ledger, she recalled a diversion Kale had noted, a series of hollowed trunks and ancient roots that could be used to funnel the attackers. "Follow me," she shouted, voice trembling but fierce. Hunter's eyes met hers, approving, and together they maneuvered the rogues into a narrow passage where movement was restricted. One by one, they turned the attacker's own momentum against them, forcing several to stumble into traps Aria had improvised from the natural environment. The battle raged, intensity rising with each passing second. Yet in the midst of chaos, Aria felt something more, a whisper from the bond, not just Hunter's presence, but a shared recognition of survival, of unity in the face of darkness. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and intoxicating all at once. Finally, the last rogue fell back, retreating into the shadows from which it had come. Aria and Hunter stood together, panting, wounds minor but pride swelling. They had survived the first assault, but both knew it was only the beginning. Hunter turned to her, his eyes dark, earnest. "You were incredible. We couldn't have done this without you." Aria's gaze softened, yet remained wary. This was just one wave. The rogues are organized, patient. Kyle's plan is bigger than we thought. Hunter's jaw tightened determination, hardening his features. Then we go deeper. We find them before they strike again. Together. The forest seemed to close around them, shadows lengthening, whispers of unseen threats lingering. But for the first time, Aria felt more than fear. She felt purpose, power, and a bond that could withstand the darkness. Chapter 16. Secrets beneath the moon. The moon hung low and silver over the forest, casting elongated shadows that flickered like ghosts. Aria moved cautiously, senses alert to every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant snap of a branch, even the subtle vibrations through the earth beneath her feet. Hunter walked beside her, a silent shadow of vigilance, his presence both reassuring and electrifying. "Something's off," Hunter murmured, his eyes scanning the tree line. His alpha instincts flared, and Aria could feel the tension radiating from him through the bond. It wasn't just the rogues, they weren't the only danger tonight. Aria's heart beat faster. The bond hummed with urgency, whispering warnings she couldn't ignore. She flexed her fingers, feeling the dormant power within her stir. This wasn't fear, it was awareness, a recognition that survival demanded more than instinct, it demanded clarity, cunning, and courage. They reached the clearing Kyle had marked in his ledger, a circle of ancient stones, worn smooth by time. Each stone hummed faintly with energy Aria hadn't noticed before. The moment they stepped into the circle, the temperature dropped, and a subtle vibration pulsed beneath their feet. "This isn't just a waypoint," Aria said softly. Realizing that the rogues had embedded some sort of ancient warning system or trap here, they've been using these stones to track pack movements. Hunter's brow furrowed, lips pressing into a thin line. "Then we need to be careful. If they know we're here," he didn't finish. The threat hung unspoken but heavy between them. A sudden movement in the shadows snapped their attention. A figure emerged, cloaked, face hidden beneath a hood. Aria's instincts screamed danger, and she stepped in front of Hunter, claws half extended. "You shouldn't be here," the figure said, voice low, calculated, almost hypnotic. "The pack doesn't know the truth, and yet you wander freely, thinking yourself safe." Aria's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. "Who are you?" The hooded figure tilted its head, a faint smile playing on lips unseen. "Someone who knows what lurks beneath the pack's loyalty." Someone who knows the bonds you think protect you are fragile threads at best, and some truths are better left buried beneath the moon. Hunter stepped forward, jaw tightening. Reveal yourself now. The figure laughed softly, a sound that sent shivers down Aria's spine. Soon, it whispered, but not yet. Tonight, watch the shadows. Tomorrow, the reckoning begins. Before they could react, the figure melted into the darkness, leaving a faint shimmer in the air, like a warning, a promise, and a threat all in one. Aria exhaled, her body tense, heart racing. We're not alone, she said. Not just the rogues, someone else is manipulating the pieces. Hunter's hand found hers, fingers lacing together through the bond. Then we uncover it, together. Nothing can take us by surprise if we face it as one. The moonlight bathed them in silver, shadows stretching and shifting, whispering secrets they had yet to hear. And for the first time, Aria felt the magnitude of what they were up against. Not just the rogues, but a deeper, darker scheme threatening everything they knew. Chapter 17. Bloodlines and Betrayals. The morning sun barely pierced the heavy fog that clung to the forest, casting everything in muted gray. Aria's senses were on high alert as she navigated the narrow trail leading to the ruins she had discovered weeks ago. Every step was measured, cautious, as if the forest itself held its breath around her. Hunter followed closely behind, his presence a constant anchor, yet she could sense the storm brewing within him, the guilt, the obsession to protect, and the unspoken fear that he might fail. The bond between them pulsed like a heartbeat, tethering their emotions, their instincts, their very souls together. When they reached the ruins, Aria felt it immediately, a surge of energy that thrummed beneath her skin, familiar yet terrifying. The stone walls were etched with symbols she didn't recognize, glowing faintly with a cold, eerie light. She stepped closer, fingers tracing the lines, and memories not her own flickered across her mind, visions of ancestors, of battles fought in shadows, of a power that had been hidden from her for generations. Your bloodline, Hunter whispered, voice tight. It's more than I imagined. You're tied to this land, to this power, and someone knows. Aria's eyes narrowed. The rogues or someone else? Before Hunter could answer, a rustle came from above. Aria instinctively leapt aside as a figure descended, landing silently on the stones. It was Kale, the rogue who had been closest to revealing the pack's secrets, but now his allegiance was unclear. His eyes dark and unreadable, fixed on Aria with a mixture of curiosity and warning. You shouldn't be here, Kale said, voice low, almost a growl. The truth isn't kind. Your family, they made choices, dangerous choices, and those choices are why the rogues are here, why your pack bleeds at night, why you. He paused, gaze piercing. You were always marked. Aria's stomach tightened. Marked? What do you mean? Kale stepped closer, lowering his voice. Your ancestors sealed a pact, one that granted your blood immense strength, but it came at a cost. There are those who would kill to reclaim what was promised generations ago, and they've started tonight. Hunter stepped between them, claws half extended. If you know anything about these attacks, now is the time to speak. Kale's eyes flicked to him, calculating. I'll tell you this, I owe you nothing. But if you survive the next full moon, if you survive the trials your bloodline demands, then maybe... He let the words hang before disappearing into the fog, leaving nothing but the echo of his warning. Aria's chest heaved, her mind spinning. The rogues weren't acting alone. They were instruments of a legacy, a plan centuries in motion. The weight of it pressed down, threatening to crush her resolve. Yet the bond with Hunter tightened, grounding her, reminding her that despite the chaos, they faced it together. We need to prepare, Hunter said firmly, eyes scanning the horizon. Whatever is coming, we can't face it blindly. We use our strength, our bond, and we uncover every secret before they can strike again. Aria nodded, feeling a surge of determination. The power within her was awakening, demanding recognition, and she would no longer be a pawn in a game centuries in motion. Whatever betrayal lay ahead, she would face it with Hunter at her side, or fight alone if necessary. The fog thickened around them, the forest whispering secrets that were yet to be revealed, shadows dancing with threats unseen. And as the first rays of sunlight broke through, Aria knew that nothing, neither rogue nor pack nor ancient pact, would ever be the same again. Chapter 18. The Full Moon Reckoning. The night arrived like a predator stalking its prey, cloaking the forest in darkness so dense it seemed to swallow every sound. The full moon hung high, bathing the world in silver light, igniting the primal instincts that Aria had fought so hard to control. Her heart thudded in her chest, not with fear, but with anticipation. Hunter's presence beside her was solid, unwavering, yet she could sense the tension coiling in his muscles, the calculated restraint in his movements. The pack had gathered silently, their eyes reflecting the moonlight, a blend of loyalty and doubt shimmering in their gazes. Every member knew the stakes tonight. The rogues would strike, and nothing less than their survival would matter. Aria closed her eyes, letting the bond guide her, feeling the pulse of power within her veins. Memories of her ancestors flickered in her mind, the battles fought, the strength inherited, the sacrifices made. This was more than survival. This was a reckoning. A howl tore through the forest, sharp and chilling, followed by a flurry of movement in the shadows. The rogues had arrived, their forms darting between the trees like living shadows, their eyes glinting with malice. Aria's senses sharpened. Every rustle, every snap of a twig, every faint breath became a signal. Hunter moved first, leaping forward with precision, his claws cutting through the air. Aria followed, her own strength surging in tandem with the bond. They were in perfect synchrony, a storm of fury and determination. Their movements a dance honed through shared struggle and unspoken understanding. The first rogue lunged, and Aria met it head-on. A shock of energy erupted from her palms as she struck, the force sending the attacker tumbling back. Every strike, every defensive motion, was amplified by the bond, and with every passing second, she could feel herself growing stronger, more attuned to the latent power that had been dormant for so long. But the battle was far from one-sided. The rogues pressed, relentless and cunning, exploiting every weakness, testing every bond. Hunter barked orders, coordinating the pack, his voice cutting through the chaos. Yet even he could sense the shift in the tide. The rogues were no longer just mindless attackers, they were hunting for something far more dangerous than the pack itself. Aria's vision blurred with movement, the moonlight casting elongated shadows across the forest floor. She saw a figure tall, commanding, radiating a dark energy that made her stomach twist. It was Kale. He had returned, and this time his intentions were unmistakable. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he hissed, voice like ice, eyes locking on her. "This is bigger than both of you, your bloodline, your bond. It's the key." Aria didn't hesitate. Channeling the strength that had been awakened within her, she surged forward, letting the energy of her ancestors flow through her. Light erupted from her hands, blinding and fierce, and the forest shook with the intensity of her power. The rogues faltered, retreating under the force, their momentum broken. Hunter reached her side, breath ragged but steady. "Aria, it's incredible," he said, awe-threading his tone. You've become something beyond anything I imagined." Aria's chest heaved, sweat and adrenaline mingling on her skin. Yet even as victory seemed within reach, her eyes met Kale's once more, and she knew this was only the beginning. The rogues had retreated tonight, but the war was far from over, and as the moon dipped lower, casting its final light, Aria felt the weight of choice pressing down on her. Power could save, or it could destroy, and she alone had to decide which path to follow. Chapter 19. Shadows over the packed dawn barely touched the horizon when Aria woke, muscles still humming with the echoes of last night's battle. The forest was quiet now, deceptively serene, the aftermath of chaos hidden beneath layers of mist and fallen leaves. Hunter slept nearby, his face softened by exhaustion, yet even in slumber, she could sense the weight he carried, the guilt, the hope, the relentless drive to protect her at all costs. Aria rose, feeling the bond pulse like a living entity beneath her skin. Every nerve in her body was alert, aware that last night's skirmish was just a prelude. The rogues were organized, strategic, and now it was clear, someone or something was orchestrating them from the shadows. As she moved through the camp, whispers and uneasy glances greeted her. The pack was shaken. The attacks had left cracks in their confidence. Leaders questioned decisions, alliances wavered, and the once solid trust in Alpha Amos, though he was absent, had become fragile. Every wolf seemed to sense the invisible tension threading through the pack. Aria's mind spun with possibilities, but instinct guided her to the clearing near the old oak, where the moonlight last night had ignited her latent power. She knelt, placing her hands on the cold earth, feeling the pulse of the land, the heartbeat of the forest itself. It whispered secrets, fragmented visions of the rogues' plans and hints of a darker hand, one that sought to manipulate both pack and rogue alike. Hunter stirred, drawing closer, his voice a low murmur. "You're awake earlier than I expected." Aria didn't turn. "The rogues aren't acting alone," she said, her voice steady. "There's someone guiding them, someone patient enough to wait until the pack is fractured and vulnerable." Hunter's eyes narrowed. "Do you think it's someone from within?" She finally looked at him, locking eyes. "I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it won't wait, and neither can we." The morning passed intense preparation, training, reconnaissance, and strategy consumed them. Every pack member was on edge, their instincts sharpened by fear and uncertainty. Yet through it all, the bond between Aria and Hunter thrummed, a lifeline of trust and unspoken promises. It was their anchor amidst the gathering storm. By nightfall, the first signs of movement appeared on the edge of the forest, small, deliberate patterns of rogue patrols probing, testing boundaries. Aria and Hunter moved silently, eyes and senses attuned to every flicker of shadow. The energy in the air was electric, charged with imminent confrontation. Then, a scream sliced through the night. A young wolf from the pack had been ambushed, dragged into darkness before anyone could react. Aria's blood ran cold, but the bond flared violently, pulling her forward. Hunter was already beside her, claws gleaming in the faint moonlight, his presence steady and commanding. The chase began swift, silent, relentless. The forest became a maze of shifting shadows, every tree and stone a potential hiding place for enemies. But Aria's newfound control over her power allowed her to anticipate movements, see through the chaos, and act with precision. Together, she and Hunter cornered the rogue, only to find him writhing in the grip of a mysterious force, eyes glowing unnaturally, as if possessed. Hunter growled, stepping forward. "This isn't normal rogue behavior. Someone else is controlling them." Aria's heart pounded. She felt it in the air, in the pull of the bond, the tremor of power waiting to be unleashed. "We're close," she whispered, "too close for comfort." And as the shadows deepened, stretching like fingers across the forest floor, both knew the coming days would demand everything: courage, strength, and trust in one another, to survive the storm looming over the pack. Chapter 20. The shadows. Heart night draped over Havermouth like a velvet cloak, suffocating and electric. The air was thick with tension, every rustle of leaves or snapping twig hinting at danger lurking just beyond sight. Aria stood at the edge of the clearing, the bond thrumming beneath her skin, a living pulse that demanded attention, connection, surrender. Hunter was beside her, his presence steady, grounding. They had faced rogue attacks, betrayals, and chaos, but tonight was different. Tonight, the final hand would be revealed. Every whisper, every shadow, every strategic misstep pointed to the same truth. Someone inside the pack had been orchestrating the assaults, using fear as a weapon to fracture them from within. Aria's eyes scanned the darkness. The rogue she had cornered days ago had been only a pawn. The real threat waited in the heart of the forest, cloaked in power and malice, testing her strength, testing the bond. Suddenly, a ripple of movement, swift, calculated. Figures emerged from the shadows. Rogue packs aligned unnaturally, their eyes glowing, their loyalty a weapon against the very pack they sought to destroy. At the center, a figure stepped forward, the mastermind revealed. A wolf with eyes as cold as obsidian, his aura exuding control and menace. "You've done well to come this far," the stranger intoned, voice smooth and lethal. "But the pack will crumble tonight, and you," his gaze fixed on Aria, "will either fall with it or join me." Aria felt the bond spike, hunger and warning intertwining. Hunter's hand found hers, a silent pledge of trust. "We face this together," he said, voice low but resolute. The fight ignited with a storm of movement, claws, teeth, and supernatural power clashing in a symphony of chaos. Aria unleashed her full potential, drawing on the energy of the bond, channeling it with precision. Hunter moved in perfect sync, every strike protective, every maneuver synchronized with the flow of her power. The mastermind struck with devastating force, controlling the rogue wolves like puppets. But Aria's instincts, honed through every trial, allowed her to see the threads of control, and with a surge of will, she severed the connection, freeing the manipulated wolves and turning the tide. In the chaos, she confronted the mastermind directly. Power clashed against power, a battle not just of physical strength but of mind, will, and dominance. Every moment was a test. Could she embrace the bond fully, trust Hunter implicitly, and rise beyond fear and hesitation? Hunter's voice broke through the whirlwind. "You don't have to do this alone. Trust me. Trust us." That single thread of trust, the culmination of shared trials, pain, and growth, anchored Aria. The bond flared, an unstoppable force, not of submission but of unity. With a final surge, she channeled the combined strength of her wolf, her bond, and her courage into a decisive strike. The mastermind faltered, defeated, leaving the rogue wolves disoriented but free. Silence settled over the forest, broken only by the ragged breathing of the victorious. The pack regrouped, eyes wide with awe and newfound respect. Aria and Hunter stood together, their bond no longer a source of tension but of harmony and strength. Hunter's hand lingered on hers, thumb brushing over the back of her hand. "We survived," he murmured, "and now we choose our future." Aria allowed herself a small smile, exhaustion and relief mingling with something deeper, a sense of ownership, of power, of love tempered by trials. "Together," she said softly. The moonlight bathed them both in silver glow, a silent witness to the rebirth of the pack, the bond, and the undeniable truth. Sometimes, survival and love are inseparable, forged in fire, shadows, and unwavering trust. Epilogue. Dawn of a new pack. The first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, spilling gold and amber across the forest canopy. The night's battles were behind them, but the scars, physical and emotional, remained, etched deep into every wolf and every heart. Aria stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, wind tousling her hair, the bond between her and Hunter now steady, luminous, undeniable. Hunter joined her, silent, yet his presence radiated a quiet strength. There was no need for words. Their journey from childhood echoes, pain, and rebellion to shared trials and ultimate trust had forged a connection that transcended fear, anger, and past wounds. The pack stirred below, moving with newfound cohesion. The rogue wolves had been integrated, their resentment replaced with respect and understanding. Havermouth, once fractured and chaotic, now breathed with life and unity. Aria lifted her head to the rising sun. The warmth touched her skin and seemed to seep into her soul. For the first time in years, she felt not just safe but whole. The bond, once a source of tension and conflict, had become a channel of strength, guiding her, empowering her, reminding her that she was never truly alone. Hunter's hand found hers, thumb brushing along the line of her knuckles. "We've come far," he murmured, "and now we lead." She squeezed his hand, a mix of gratitude, love, and fierce determination. "Together," she replied. Together, not just the two of them, but the pack, the bonds, the future they would build side by side. Below them, the pack's Alpha Council gathered. Eyes met, acknowledging not just their survival but their growth. A new era had begun, one forged in trust, in the crucible of adversity, and in the choice to rise above the shadows. Aria felt a quiet smile tug at her lips. She had faced darkness, rejection, and fear, and she had emerged not as a victim, but as a wolf who knew her strength, her power, and her heart. Hunter's eyes met hers, and in that look, she understood everything. The trials, the pain, and the bond had all led to this moment. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the valley, the pack, and the path ahead. And as they descended together, side by side, Aria realized that some bonds were never meant to chain. You survived them, embraced them, and in doing so, found your true power. In the distance, the forest whispered promises of adventure, of loyalty tested and love deepened. And Aria knew, without doubt, that whatever the future held, she and Hunter, united, would face it with fire in their hearts and wolves at their side. The dawn of a new pack had arrived, and with it, hope, strength, and the beginning of everything they were meant to become.